podcast. I am your host, Rico Bartles, and today joining me is our very special guest. I
Latifa!
love that energy. Oh my goodness. I swear we didn't practice this. I'm
I
so
did
loud.
not. I did not.
So today, again, 18th Avenue Podcast. If this is your first time tuning into it, this is a channel where we explore culture and people's, their stories. And yeah, so if you do have a story to share and if that's your cup of tea, we definitely want you on the show. With that said, I just want to, before we kick off this podcast here, I want to take a quick minute here because I haven't had a chance to do it since it happened. Um, I wanted to say peace, love, and harmony to all the people in Lebanon, Beirut, to the tragedy that's occurring there. We know that we understand firsthand we're going through hard time. It's like, and I know that you all are going through that. Our prayers is with you all. And also, just a quick background here: Lebanese, Lebanon and Liberia actually have a very close relationship. I mean, we've had so many Lebanese in Africa, in Liberia. There's a running joke that the Lebanese run the country. So, yeah, no, honestly, peace and love, and our prayers goes out to you guys, and yeah. But Latifa, welcome.
Thank
Is
you.
that Queen Latifa?
Sometimes it's my alias. It's how I get people to know
Oh.
my name. Usually I say Queen Latifah.
That's pretty cool. So I know a little bit about you, but if you just wanted to, just for the sake of the audiences, if you kind of wanted to tell them who you were, where you're from, and all that good stuff.
Who I am, where I'm from. I am Latifa, and I am a human being from East Africa. I was born in Burundi. My family we immigrated to Canada because of the genocide back in Rwanda that later on moved through to the rest of the eastern, well, mostly just Burundi. And it was tribal related, and we moved a very long time ago, and to this day, I think that there's a part of me that just needs to go back, because I think that I left at a time when I was just starting to understand my surroundings. I have little memories, but just enough to know that this is not home, but also not enough to feel like I have a big connection or a huge connection to my home country. So that's a little bit about me. Is I feel very connected to my background, and I feel a huge desire to go back and bring back and support and create and support the growth that is necessary for not just my own home country, but just Africa in general. But I definitely feel like my coming to Canada impacts who I am to this day. So a lot of my beliefs are grounded in human rights and immigration and just Pan-Africanism and just the diaspora, and how Black and Indigenous relations cooperate with our current system. So that's a little bit about me and how I came to be interested in these things. And yeah, that's Latifa, really.
How did you come? You just said it. That was my next question. How did you come to be interested in Pan Africanism, um, human rights issues?
I am, I like to believe that I'm a political body, not by choice. Um, by virtue of just the background I have had to be aware of politics, both here on the ground and also back home, and how politics in the West affect politics elsewhere. And so my coming to this country had to do with politics. And so I have never been able to escape that reality, and I have been grounded and been fueled by that reality and by that coming here. So Pan Africanism for me is who I am. It is a recognition of my African identity, even when I'm not in Africa. And I think that it is also by that I have to recognize the African identity of others across the world. And I'm interested in, knowing how we came to be all over the world, and the ways in which we identify with our blackness. So
We always have a choice.
And what would you say that the African identity is?
the African identity, that's a really tough question, because I don't like to define it. I don't think that it's very difficult, because from a Pan-Africanist perspective, it's tough to deny someone an identity because we think African, and the first thing we ask is, what part of Africa are you from? Somebody sees you and your blackness and immediately assumes, well, you're not from here. And there's a lot of black appearing people who are not immediately connected to Africa. And so how do we define their identity? How do they come to solidify and secure their African identity? And to me, that's a choice that they make themselves, and that's something they decide for themselves and how they define it. So I stray away from defining that because I think it can really leave out a lot of people, and I don't intend to. I think that we're all from Africa, so how do you define your connection to Africa is something everyone has to work on.
Right. No, absolutely. I agree with that. And there was something else you mentioned early on when you talk about your journey and what led you to come to Canada, or at least you and your family immigrating here. And I think that I can definitely relate to that because it wasn't a genocide, but in a way it was, because it was a tribal warfare that led us here. All of the Liberians all over the world today. It was because of that I'm sitting here in Canada now. So much like yourself, I mean, I've always kind of like said, I'm not going back to Africa. Like, what's the sense, whatever, like, is this, is that?
Yeah,
Like, I've been putting it off for years.
all?
But more and more now is becoming more and more of a thing that I know that I want to go in and not just experience, but I want to live. My belief with, how when I grew up here. So when I see Westerners leave here and go over to, say, Florida to vacation, I picture that Africans should be able to do that. Come here and vacation and go back
And
home.
then leave.
Right? It shouldn't be like a permanent stay. Like you have nowhere to go.
Yes, we shouldn't be begging to be here.
No, no. So today's episode, of course, is all going to be about Africa. So where I was reading, I shared something. I think it was this week or the early part of last week, and it's basically had to do with. Just give me a moment here. Let me bring up my note. Okay, here we go. So it had to do with, I was very surprised to see that even though so many African countries in Africa right now has been independence, for a very long time. And I think that people don't fully understand that terminology and what it means to be independent
No.
and freedom.
No.
Which I find really ironic. But I will get to that. But what is your take on, and I know you probably read it, the 14 countries in Africa that is still basically paying colonial taxes
yeah.
to the French government and probably to other governments as
Yep.
well. We just don't know about that yet.
Yeah. So when I first learned about us as Africans, because I don't even like to think of just which countries are paying. That to me is the little paperwork. Mm-hmm. What's important is the fact that there's dollars being expected from African nations that have suffered at the hands of colonialism, white supremacy, imperialism, capitalism, and are still to this day, although globally we have created an image that we've overcome these old age beliefs that whites are superior to blacks and others, and that we've overcome the idea of whites going to explore and discover and taking and stealing. But that's only been on the surface. We've created that image. Underneath, we have the very same mechanisms that existed 100 years ago, 400 years ago, 700 years ago, are still operating right now to this day, like as we exist right now, as we exist. I like to always remember that my existence on this land is violent to indigenous peoples. And that is a constant reminder for me because I remember how I am constantly violated by white supremacy and how my peers and my closest friends, my family, are at mercy to this system. And I remember my first time was when I was around 9 years old, and my dad taught us about this because he wanted us to understand that our coming to this country was not, as you were saying, it wasn't a gift, it wasn't something we should be celebrating because this should be temporary. It shouldn't be something we see as we found our home necessarily, but that we're here to learn, we're here to reflect, we're here to be given a different set of opportunities than our brothers and sisters back home who had a different route to their journey when it came to escaping genocide. So he always made us understand, first of all, this is indigenous people's land. And then on top of that, that's where we came to understand land ownership and the idea of imperialism. And it was really scary for me because this was like back in 2000, I'm very young and I'm being told that we were saved from our country we were saved from a country that was set on fire by white people, and then the same white people told us they will save us from the fire they created, bring us into this land that they stole from other people. And while they keep us here, while they allow us as immigrants, give us asylum or whatever, they're still taking from us back home. They're stealing from our cousins, they're stealing from our aunts and our uncles. And my dad wanted us to continuously work hard with that intent in mind, that you're not actually, whatever money you make, whatever successes you make here, they're always at the expense of someone else. And until you're working towards bettering other people's lives, then you're not doing much with your life. And he wanted us to understand that, not just because it was like, go give charity, go donate, go volunteer here. He wanted us to understand the systems that made it that we needed to volunteer. Why do we need to go feed homeless people? Why? Is there not enough money in this world? Who has the most money? Why do they have it? So those were things that we learned super early on. And I remember feeling so much anger that even to this day, with all the harm that had been caused, me being kicked out of my own home country, we were still paying these people who did that to us. And so I got really interested in learning more about that. And to me, it is just like, again, a reflection and a reminder that nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Just on the surface, things have gotten prettier. We've packaged things better. But I think that as an African community, we constantly have to remind each other and hold each other accountable to what are we going to do with the resources we gain here. I don't feel comfortable anymore to think that it's enough for me to just stay here. It's enough for me to just take what I got and stay here. I don't want to consider myself the lucky who made it out. I want to think of it as there was a purpose for me. And I think that purpose is to not be selfish. And it's to remind myself that even though I made it out, I'm not out yet. And so knowing about and reading about and you having brought that back up is really important, because I think we forget that. We get comfortable. We make it to the West. You get your citizenship, you get your passport, and you just forget everyone else. And I never want to forget people that really could have been me. Off of pure luck, it could have been me. So I think of that a lot, and I don't like to consider myself as like any more special than the person who didn't make it out, or less than. So there's a responsibility, and there's a responsibility I have with my life and having made it out and being alive and having all the privileges that I have. I think that to remember and to continuously educate myself on where I came from is part of my work. It's part of my journey, and my activism isn't complete if I'm comfortable. I think I constantly have to stay uncomfortable, and reading about things like that is very, very uncomfortable, because I start to think, well, in what ways am I actively today contributing to these countries and their taxes and their giving to? So it's a difficult place to navigate without feeling completely guilty, but also trying to stay motivated and let news like that empower you as opposed to debilitate you and make you feel just powerless. I like to think of it as there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of us here that are able to do it. So it's a matter of finding the right people, connecting with people who see things that you do, and who are able to articulate when you're wrong and tell you, hey, maybe try to go about it this way. And that's the work we have to do in order to remove and eliminate these things. I feel like there has to be a point in our reality, in our future, where we can look on news like that, on facts like that, and say that could never happen, and actually be right about that, and actually be talking about a time when the solution is already there. But we're still in a place where the stuff is still happening, and a lot of us just don't know.
We always have a choice.
Yeah, and and I'm not really sure how many of us are actually willing to take a stand for something and say, well, enough is enough. I feel like, us as human beings, we tend to forget people experiences and the things that they say and their beliefs is typically based off of their actual living experiences. And so if you and I have had a completely different experience as to where we come from and where we are and how we fit into this society, I fit into this society just fine. I'm not complaining. But that would cause us to have two different views and two different perspectives. There are probably folks, and I've spoken to a lot of people. I don't often run into them because I work in oil and gas, so I get firsthand opportunity to run into very new Africans into the country. I'm talking 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but they're already in a place where they're able to make money. And one of the things that we always talk about, and that I always ask them about, is, hey, would you go back home? It's like, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm working on this. And a lot of these guys, they already have something that they're working on. So they've planted the seed already for when they do go back home. But one of the things that, because for me it was really hard just kind of reading this. And here we are, we have the West that is implementing democracy, freedom for all over the world. And here we are, we get things like this. So now who steps in to say, hey, France, colonial France, you can't do this. Or hey, colonial British, you can't do this. Colonial America, you can't do this. Or are they all just in cahoot together on this thing?
See, I used to believe they were in cahoots, and I think they're in competition. I think I've recognized one of my biggest breakthroughs has been separating the structure from the people, the systems from the people. And I've understood it that realistically, anyone who is for this system is in cahoots. So I think we have African leaders back home who are in cahoots with colonial France and colonial Britain. We have leaders in Asia, in Southeast Asia. We have leaders in South America who are in cahoots, right? My perspective had to change because I had to gain a certain level of peace for myself, because I was operating from a space of anger and from a space of just resentment, and I don't think there's anything productive that comes from any of those spaces. Right. And so I had to switch my resolve because it was no longer healthy for me, and the best thing that I could do was to start separating the systems that I hated, the systems and the people and the structures and the concepts and the ideologies that I hated, the historical facts that I hated, from the people that exist today. The reality of is today, every single one of us, and we met at the protest, and the thing I kept pushing was that we're not innocent, and not just as in Canada, but as in every single human being. We're not innocent. So I can't think that I've been victimized by white supremacy and colonialism and imperialism because of the genocide it caused in my country, causing me to come here, but not recognize the extent to which I'm able to cause harm to others, and not be able to recognize the extent to which I can participate in destructive and harmful systems. And when I was able to separate that, I could say, well, I could also participate in those and still be a good person. I could still participate in racist, or maybe not racist, but I could participate in prejudice or classist structures and systems and still be a good person, and maybe still not even be aware of it. So my understanding of that came from trying to find peace and trying to really separate myself from the anger that I had towards these systems, and separate it from anger towards people. So that's why I say I don't believe they're in cahoots, because I don't think of it as people. I think of it as it's a system. Like it's just one system, and it's operating to serve a particular group of people. But even those people who are supposed to be privileged under this system, and we're going to be explicit, white people, even not all white people are privileging from white supremacy. Not all white people are benefiting. And the reality is, you say, well, why? If white, I have white people who have argued with me. My own neighbor one time said, if white supremacy is so real, if white privilege is real, then how come there are poor white people? How come there are homeless white people? Right. That's an argument that gets brought up a lot from white people. I've had it so many times. They tell you, if white privilege is real, then how come there are poor white people? How come there are homeless white people? And the reality of it is like, if that's not an indication for you that even white people, not all white people can benefit from the system, it should be an indication for you that this system is actually not benefiting the whole of humanity. And that even when it tells us that a specific group is to benefit, even within that group, there are details. You have to be male, you have to be straight, you have to be this, you have to be rich, you have to be able-bodied, you have to have all these criteria, and if you don't fit into those, then you might also end up being beside a black homeless person or an indigenous homeless person on the street as a white person. And I've heard that as an excuse to go against the idea that white supremacy, white privilege exists. And to me, it speaks to the fact that I'm fighting a system. I'm fighting a singular system. It's not people. People can help that system just as much as people can dismantle that system. And it's people from all over. I think that it's a wide range of people who are trying to fight the system, including white people. And so to me, I don't necessarily think it's just countries. Now I think more of it as a system that has really infiltrated all over the world. We see capitalism and the greed that it breeds in our home countries and the ways that our leaders are doing us in. So they're participating in that system just as much as a Bill Gates is, in my opinion. Now, we can argue who benefits more in that system, a Bill Gates or a Paul Mugabe, but we know that it's not the same benefits, but the idea being they're both benefiting from a system. And that's what I started to distinguish, and I don't think they're in cahoots. I think we just have one system, and all of us as humans, we help it, or we hinder it. And if we collectively decide to let it go, it'll crumble. It'll crumble, and I just don't think that it's a matter of focusing on who anymore. It's just a matter of saying, personally, what am I doing right now?
We always have a choice.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, and clarifying the cahoot part of it. I think maybe at one point they probably were, but I saw a very significant documentary, which I think is significant. I don't watch a lot of, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but there are a few people that I really, I know that if they were to co-sign something, yeah, I know it's going to be of substance. And one of these individuals happens to be Michael Moore. So Michael Moore.
His documentary.
Yeah. So actually, there's another one you're probably going to enjoy and watch because it gave you it tells it like no one else has told it before. So it is by Oliver Twist. Oliver Stone, film director Oliver Stone, and it is called The Untold History of America. And it's an entire episode. And how I came across this information was that I was listening to Michael Moore podcast, and he had him on there. And the moment they started talking, I said, okay, this is definitely something I'm going to be interested in. And what I got from that was that the world has always been about dominance, world domination. And I think that's where the inspiration came from with the Hitler situations that we saw later on that went sideways. And then, of course, but all of these countries have always been in competition with each other. Yeah, and it's always been one empire after another empire. And currently, when I look at Africa, the side thing is that I understand that this system realized and they know our weak points. Our leaders are very greedy. We think about the money aspect of it. We think about right now. We're not thinking about, 5 years from now, if I sell my people out, what's going to happen to them in 5-10 years' time? We're not thinking that. We're just thinking, hey, give me as much money as you can give me. Let me kind of like
put it in a Swiss bank and get out.
Exactly, right? I mean, that brings me another thing too. Like, you know, there's so many issues. There's so many issues that we're having, but I feel like the one way that we can start resolving this, which I thought Robert Mugabe did like a few years ago, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. There was something, I don't remember the exact story now. Maybe you might be on top of that, but I don't remember the exact story. There was something going on. And so he kicked out all these colonial whites out of the country. So fast forward to this month. Now, that country is being told to pay reparation of $3.5 million when you have a country of, and I'm talking about Zimbabwe, the education, 89% of the people are educated. 90% of them are living below the poverty line. Any thought on that?
Well, first of all, I realized I said Paul Mugabe instead of Paul Kagame, Robert Mugabe. But I think out of sight, out of mind. And I think that works for, and especially, I say this because you brought up the idea of empires, and I think that's a really good, just summarization of what's happening right now. We're in an empire, and it's gonna fall. And the reality of it is, when you study different empires, what you notice is that idea of I guess from a Marxian term, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and we've always had an upper class and a lower class, and we've always had the dominance, the fight for dominance. Even, you know, when people say, and maybe, I don't know if you've heard this argument, but people argue, well, slavery, the transatlantic slave trade wasn't bad because black people were practicing slavery within themselves. And fair point, you're absolutely right, because the reality, what we've concluded here is the essence of our humanity is power, is to create powers, to establish powers, to maintain power. And one of the ways which we can, I think as humans, I genuinely don't believe we're bad. And I think the reason is, when you look at the structures of our humanity, is that even those people who have been the most wealthy have always tried to insulate themselves away from the poor. And you could argue that it's because they don't want to be associated. It's because they want to not see they don't want to, they think they're higher and better than, yeah, those are all true, but I also think, and I argue, that it has to also do with a part of their morality, where to see someone wearing garbs ripped up and you know, peeing outside versus, and you go into a mansion right next door, the images of that, the scenery of that is just not attractive. And why is it not attractive? I think that it plays into our morality. It's not attractive to see indifference, to see difference, inequality, to see difference, to see disparity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Disparity is not attractive. So we could argue that all the times which people insulate themselves into these neighborhoods and is simply to do with elitism. Yes, that has to do it, but I think elitism at the core of it has to do with the fact that we are so turned off by disparity because we know deeply at the core how bad it is for me to live super lavishly while my neighbor lives in complete poverty. And so we distance ourselves. And you look at our leaders, where do they go live most of the time? Where do they go vacation most of the time, right? Track their annual spendings. Where are they spending that money most of the time? It's not home. It's not at home. And so out of sight, out of mind, to me, is how a lot of our injustice is perpetuated. Is that, you know, you and I, we get into a certain class, well, now I gotta move into this neighborhood, I gotta start driving this car, I gotta start doing this, and then you move yourself way further slowly until you no longer see people that you used to fight for, people that you used to go to rallies and protests for, you no longer see anymore, so what's the point of fighting for them? Why would Kanye fight for me, who worries over a $20 meal when he's spending $20,000, you know? I had to bring him up because I have a personal, just because I really had an attachment to his coming about, And he was very political, and he was someone who really encouraged me. A lot of his Def Jam poetry really brought me into loving poetry and rap, and I just think that he's done a lot of disservice to the people who supported that aspect of him. But that's a different discussion.
I need you to hold that thought.
That's a different thought.
You hold that thought. I'll be right back.
Okay.
We always have a choice.
On that note, we should probably leave the Kanye thing.
Let's leave Kanye out so he doesn't.
Yeah, let's
nobody
leave
gets
it, 'cause
beat up.
That could go on for some time.
I could go on about that man for years, but no, I think he's a great guy. I just think that he's going through a lot. He's dealing with a lot, but definitely a good point of just dissecting and learning from. I don't think everything has to be a matter of like cancel culture. I think sometimes we can just learn from people.
I think we have to learn from people, because otherwise, how are we supposed to move ahead? You know, on the thing of Kanye, like I said, I don't even want to get into that because I'm a huge advocate of Kanye West. But you know, just going back, okay, let's talk about the diaspora. So recently, there's been a lot of, you know, diaspora moving back home, going to Africa, moving like.
Ludacris just got his passport in Gabon.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
so
he did
excited
that.
for
Shit,
him.
I forgot
I'm
about
so
that. That was
ex-
last
yeah, I'm
year,
so excited for
right?
him.
He has a
Yeah.
passport, a dual passport now. So that's
Love
pretty
it.
exciting.
Love it.
So there's a lot of
Yeah.
people. I mean, how exciting is it? At one point, talking about Africa was like this taboo. It was like
What did they call
It's
it?
like the
Booty
butt of the
scratchers?
joke. Well, they still do, I'm sure, in certain places. Probably not in public anymore, because you know everything is offensive these days. But yeah, I'm sure they do. But I am super excited. Ghana is doing a great thing. We have Zambia people going back. I think that's very encouraging. So, are you looking to go back yourself?
Well, I have a dual passport, so I'm definitely going back. That's
Would you just be going back to visit initially and see?
initially would be to scope my ventures, to see what
Gotcha.
do I have to offer first of all, and what's needed in my local community. But initially would probably be to just kind of visit and scope around, and also to reacquaint myself, since I haven't been in that environment for a long time, speaking my native
Right.
language every day and such things. So definitely would just be to explore, have an actual vacation, like you were saying, the way we vacation in Europe and the way we vacation in other places. I go there and just enjoy my time and, you know, help with the local communities there and what's going on, and then also come in with like a learning perspective. Like, I'm trying to learn. I don't have all the answers just because I was in the West, which I think is a huge point for me going in there. Will have to be to check my Western privilege, and eventually I want to go and live forever, because that's the dream.
And how important you think it's going to be for like diaspora, you and I returning back home, and other people that will probably return back home? How important for us to stay disciplined to the locals there? Because you know how it is. Hey, I live in America. You have never left this place. What do you know?
And it's gonna.
That type of attitude. How important is it for us to stay disciplined and remember that at the end of the day, you know, this is their land. We've been away for too long.
Amen.
So it's theirs now.
And I think that's the way to go about it. This is their land. You've been away for too long. You've missed out on so many vital moments. So many pivotal changes occurred while you were away, and you can't just come in and then just claim everything that happened when you weren't there. You have to learn. You have to absorb. You have to reacquaint yourself. You have to relearn, and yeah, come in with a lot of humility and really expect nothing. That's how I see it. Go in expecting to give everything, but don't expect anything, because I like to think that Africa has already gifted me enough. And at this point, it's time to give to Africa. And if you're going to Africa with any bit of mindset of like, what can I get from there? Stay out of Africa. Stay out of Africa if you're trying to get something out of Africa when you go there. Stay out of there. And I include myself in that warning. Stay out of there, because checking that Western privilege is tough when you go in thinking, what do I get? What do I get? We look at a lot of the sex trades that are going on, the trafficking, the slave trades that are going on. It all comes from this perspective of I'm going to go there and what do I make while I'm there? And chances are you're going to make money. You're going to make something. You can get something from Africa, and people have and they are. But the reality is it's time to give back. It's time to give too. And I want to go when I feel like I'm ready to truly give. And I have a lot to learn.
And isn't it funny that we're here and, calling out white privileges, and it turns out we ourselves now have Western privileges that we also need to remember to check ourselves through the door before we go in there. I think it's like very, very, very exciting right now, just looking at what's going on in Africa, all the developments and all the people that I like really just going back. I think that is the right approach, is going back and not really expecting a whole bunch, expecting to give rather than to receive. Because again, we've been away for too long. We don't even know the land all that well. We don't know the language. And by the way, do you make your traditional cuisine? Do you know much about? You speak your local language, don't you?
I speak all of my native languages, and
oh wow, aren't you lucky?
Yeah, and that again, that's a privilege I had from circumstances with my family. But yeah, I think that I've been back. The first time I went back after many years since I left when I was a baby. Locals could say, "Oh, you don't sound like you're from here," because the way you speak.
Right, because because the pronunciation is all different.
A little different. They say you got a little Western swagger to you.
Right.
So the way I see it is, you're absolutely right. It's just to go in with a lot of humility and to be wanting to learn. I haven't been cooking my native food every day. I eat out most of the time. I'm eating at Nando's. I'm eating, So there's a huge gap, and it's important to account for that. And it's not to say that I'm thinking I'm better because I'm from the West, but it's saying that there's a lot that I've been away from in Africa, and to think that I've been in the West, I've been watching it all. I think the West, we have this perspective that we see it all, so we know it all. But sometimes I realize we see a lot, but we say nothing. So when you go into a country where you've watched them be harmed for years and you've done nothing, said nothing, don't come in and tell them, hey guys, this is what I'm going to tell you to do. So I'm ready to go back home and take a seat, and I'm excited to see so many people going back home. It's to just rebuild the image of Africa is the first step. To just even, regardless of what people's intentions are, I think even to start with a little bit of positive to say, people are saying, Africa, go visit it. So we can start there, and that's exciting to me.
That's awesome. Well, I would love to continue this this conversation, but dark is upon us now. So hopefully, and also we're out of time, and that is going to happen in 2, 3, 1. Okay, there you go. I turned out of red in time. So I want to thank you for coming on the show, 18th Avenue Podcast. Again, today was all about Africa and the diasporas, and just our thought. We've been living here for a while. Any last words?
Go see Africa. Go see Africa. Go give to Africa. That's what I would say. And check your privilege on that before you get off that plane.
Like when you take off your shoes at the door.
Yeah, when you take off your shoes at the door, take off your privilege,
Take off your shoes. First thing you do when you land in Africa, take off your shoes and travel bare feet for at least 2 miles before putting your shoes back on.
When you get to your hotel, you can take them off. Your 5-star hotel.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And that's pretty much it. That is a wrap. Oh, wait a minute. Where can people find you?
Oh, Instagram.
Okay, we'll put you on.